You're standing on a beach. It's 50,000 years ago. In front of you is the ocean, not a river, not a lake, the open sea. And somewhere out there, past the curve of the world, is land you have never seen and cannot see. No map tells you it exists. No one you know has ever been there. Behind you is everything you understand. In front of you is blue water all the way to the sky. And you're about to do something no creature with your kind of brain has ever survived doing on purpose. You're going to climb onto a raft made of sticks and paddle straight out into nothing. And here's the part that should stop you cold. You make it. So how? How did ancient humans, people with no metal, no sails, no compass, no writing, cross open ocean? Real ocean. The kind where you lose sight of land and the water turns from blue to black beneath you. Think about it for a second. You can't swim it. It's too far. You can't wade it. It's too deep. You can't wait for it to freeze or dry up. Because some of these crossings never closed, not even at the coldest, lowest point of the Ice Age. The water was always there. And yet, by 65,000 years ago, humans were living in Australia. To get there, they had to cross a chain of islands and at least 10 separate stretches of open sea, one of them more than 40 miles wide, with no land visible on the far side. That is not a lucky accident. That is a plan. The question is, what did they know that we assume they couldn't have known? And here's the thing nobody tells you. It's not one answer. It's never one thing. It's a stack of small, clever solutions layered on top of each other over tens of thousands of years. The boat, the stars, the swell under the hull, a trick for finding land you can't even see. And at the very end, I'm going to tell you who really made the first ocean crossing. And it wasn't us. It wasn't even close to us. Stay with me. Let's go. Let's start with the problem, because the problem is bigger than you think. Southeast Asia during the Ice Age didn't look the way it does now. So much water was locked up in glaciers that the sea dropped by more than 100 meters. Whole seabeds turned into dry land. Islands that are separate today were joined into one giant continent. You could have walked from mainland Asia across to Borneo without getting your feet wet. So for a huge part of the region, you didn't need a boat at all. You just walked. But then you hit a line, somewhere between the islands of Bali and Lombok. And running north between Borneo and Sulawesi, the ocean suddenly gets deep. Really deep. This is a real border, and scientists have a name for it. The Wallace Line. West of it, the seafloor was shallow enough to dry out when the ice locked up the water. East of it, the channel was too deep to ever disappear. Even at the lowest point of the Ice Age, when the coastline sat miles further out than today, that gap stayed full of ocean. And here's what that means. You could not walk to Australia. You could never walk to Australia. No matter how cold it got, no matter how much sea turned to ice, there was always a moat of deep water between the walkers and the southern continent. Anyone who wanted the other side had exactly one option. Get in the water and cross it, on purpose. That single strip of deep sea is the reason this whole story exists. So what did they cross it in? Here's where it gets frustrating. Because boats made of wood and reed and vine don't survive 50,000 years. They rot, they sink, they vanish. We have almost no ancient boats from this deep in time. What we have instead is a puzzle we have to solve backwards. From what floated, what grew nearby, and what a person could actually build with stone tools. The best guess, and it's a very good guess, is bamboo. In tropical Southeast Asia, bamboo grows thick, straight, and hollow, which means it floats like a cork. Lash a bundle of it together with vine, and you get a raft that's light, strong, and almost impossible to sink. You don't need nails, you don't need a saw. You don't even need to hollow anything out. You just need cordage and patience, and both were things these people already had in abundance. Think about what that raft actually is. It's not a toy. A big bamboo raft can carry several people, plus food, plus water, plus a smoldering fire packed in clay. It can take a beating from the waves and just flex instead of snapping. And when you're done, the material is growing right there on the shore, for free. Ready to be rebuilt. For a person 50,000 years ago, a bamboo raft might have been the single most advanced piece of technology they ever made. And it was enough to redraw the map of the entire planet. And it didn't happen in one leap. Nobody wakes up one morning and paddles 40 miles across. Open sea. This was a skill that grew slowly. First you cross a river, then a calm bay, then a narrow strait where you can still see the far side. Each short trip teaches you something: how the raft handles, how the current pulls, how long your arms last. Generation after generation, people got a little bolder and a little better, until crossing a stretch of ocean stopped feeling like suicide and started feeling like a journey. By the time anyone reached Australia, seafaring wasn't a gamble, it was a tradition. Here's a detail that changes everything, and almost nobody stops to think about it. Imagine one person gets swept out to sea, clings to a floating log, and washes up half dead on a new shore. Congratulations! They're completely alone. One person cannot start a population. Neither can two or three. To build a community that survives for generations, you need a real group. Enough people to have children, to avoid everyone being too closely related, to survive sickness and bad years, and still have someone left. Scientists who model this estimate, you'd need dozens of people, possibly more, to successfully found a new population on an empty continent. And here's the kicker: they'd all have to actually get there. Not one lucky castaway, but boatload after boatload, arriving close enough together in time and place to find each other and build a life together. That quietly kills the happy accident theory. You don't get dozens of people accidentally blown across 40 miles of open sea to the same beach. What you get instead is a deliberate effort. People building boats, gathering supplies, and crossing again and again, probably following the same known route. The peopling of Australia wasn't a shipwreck, it was closer to a migration convoy. And that means somebody 65,000 years ago stood on a shore, looked at the open ocean, and decided on purpose that their whole community was going across it. Okay, so you've got a raft and you've got a crowd. Now for the hard part, how do you find your way across water that all looks exactly the same? There's no road, no signpost, no coastline to follow, just flat horizon in every direction and you in the middle of it. Here's what nobody tells you: the ocean is not blank. It's packed with information if you know how to read it. Start with the sky. The sun rises in a reliable place and sets in another. At night, the stars wheel overhead in fixed patterns, and certain stars always rise and set at the same points on the horizon, night after night after night. Learn those points, and the sky becomes a compass that never needs charging. Then look down at the water itself. Out in open ocean, big swells roll in steady directions, pushed by winds that blow the same way for months at a time. A skilled traveler can feel those swells through the hull of the boat, the rhythm of the rise and the fall, and hold a dead straight line by the way. The waves lift the craft beneath them. And that's not a metaphor. Pacific navigators would literally lie down in the bottom of the canoe and steer by what their own body felt through the wood. And then there are the living signs. Seabirds fish far out but sleep on land, so at dusk you watch which way they fly home. Certain clouds pile up and hold still over hidden islands. The color of the water shifts near a reef. A drifting branch or a floating coconut means land somewhere upwind. None of it is magic. All of it is attention. Thousands of tiny observations, memorized and passed down for generations, until one person could carry the whole ocean inside their head. But now we hit the strangest problem of all, and this is the one that really gets me. When you stand on a beach and look out to sea, the earth curves away from you, which means anything low and far away drops below the horizon and disappears. For the people trying to reach Australia, the destination was often completely invisible from the shore. You could stare at that ocean your entire life and never once see the land you were aiming for. So how do you sail towards something you cannot see? For a long time, this looked impossible, and researchers assumed the first crossings had to be accidents. People swept out by a storm who got lucky. But newer studies suggest something far more impressive. Scientists carefully mapped what these ancient people could actually see from the coast, and they found a clever gap. From the beach, the target islands were hidden. But from the top of a hill or a mountain a few miles inland, those same islands popped up over the horizon into view. Think about what that tells you. Before they ever launched, they climbed. They went up high, spotted the faint shape of distant land, noted exactly which direction it sat against the stars, and fixed it in memory. Then they walked back down to a beach where they could see nothing at all, and paddled straight out toward a place they now held entirely in their heads. That is not luck. That is planning an over-the-horizon voyage, with nothing but your eyes, your legs, and your nerve. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds lovely, but it's a story. How do we actually know a raft and some star knowledge could survive real open ocean? Because someone finally tested it, for real, with their own lives. In 2019, a team of scientists in Japan decided to stop guessing and just try it. They wanted to understand how humans first reached the Ryukyu Islands off the coast of Japan around 30,000 years ago. So they built a canoe the ancient way. They took replicas of 30,000-year-old stone tools, felled a single giant cedar tree, and hollowed it out into a dugout canoe about 25 feet long. No metal, no modern gear, nothing their Stone Age subjects couldn't have had. Then 5 paddlers climbed in and pushed off from the coast of Taiwan, aiming for a small island called Yonaguni around 140 miles away. And between them and that island lay the Kuroshio, one of the strongest ocean currents on the entire planet, a river inside the sea powerful enough to sweep them hundreds of miles off course. They carried no compass and no GPS. They steered only by the sun, the stars, and the swells beneath the hull. For the first half of that journey, the island was below the horizon. They literally could not see where they were going. They paddled for more than 45 hours straight, through a full day, a full night, and into the next day, fighting that current the entire way, sleeping in shifts, hands raw, and they made it. They landed on Yonaguni, a hollowed-out log, and 5 stubborn people crossed one of the meanest stretches of water in the Pacific, using nothing a person 30,000 years ago couldn't have used. After that, the story wasn't just a story anymore. It was a demonstrated fact. And once humans figured out that the ocean could be crossed, they didn't stop. They got better. Much, much better. The greatest ocean explorers in all of human history weren't Europeans. In tall wooden ships, they were the peoples of the Pacific. Starting a few thousand years ago, a seafaring culture we call the Lapita began pushing out from the islands near New Guinea, deeper and deeper into open water, leaving a trail of distinctive pottery behind them. Their descendants became the Polynesians, and over the following centuries, they did something that still sounds impossible. They settled a triangle of ocean larger than any empire that ever existed on land, from Hawaii in the north, down to New Zealand in the south, out to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, far to the east. Tiny specks of rock separated by thousands of miles of empty water, and they found them, deliberately, in great double-hulled canoes that could carry whole families. Along with animals and crops to plant when they arrived, they navigated by a mental star map, so detailed it took a lifetime to fully learn. They read the swells, the birds, and the clouds exactly like their distant ancestors, but refined across generations into something close to a true science. They did not stumble onto Hawaii by accident. They aimed for a dot in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. And they hit it. Then they turned around, sailed home, and came back again. That is a level of skill we could barely reproduce today without satellites overhead. And just sit with the odds for a moment. Hawaii is a handful of islands in the middle of the Pacific, thousands of miles from anywhere. Rapa Nui is even more isolated, one of the loneliest inhabited places on the planet. Miss it by a few degrees and you sail past into open ocean until you die. These navigators found it anyway without a single instrument by holding a heading in their heads for weeks. And they weren't reckless. They packed to settle, which means they expected to arrive. They trusted their own knowledge of the sea so completely that they'd load a canoe with everything they owned and pointed at empty water. That trust was earned, one crossing at a time, over thousands of years of ancestors who came home alive. Now let's be honest about what we don't actually know, because the truth here has real gaps. We have never found one of these ancient boats. Not a single bamboo raft, not one Ice Age dugout from the crossing to Australia. Everything we've said about the boats is reconstruction. Smart, evidence-based reconstruction. But reconstruction all the same. The wood simply didn't survive the tens of thousands of years. And some of the claims are genuinely disputed. There are stone tools on the island of Crete that may be over 130,000 years old, which would mean someone was crossing the Mediterranean long before modern humans were supposedly able to. Not everyone accepts those dates, and the argument is still very much alive. So when somebody tells you they know exactly how the first sailors did it, be a little skeptical. What we truly have is the where and the when, pinned down hard by real excavations and real dating, plus a very careful, very good guess about the how. And that honesty is part of the point. The mystery is part of the story. But here's the last thing, and I saved it for the end because it's the wildest part of all. Everything we've talked about, Australia, the Pacific, the rafts, the stars, all of that is our species. Homo sapiens, us. And we've quietly been telling ourselves that we were the first ones to conquer the sea. We weren't. On the island of Sulawesi and on nearby Flores, archaeologists have dug up stone tools that are more than 1,000,000 years old. Over 1,000,000. And remember the Wallace Line, that deep channel that never dried up. Not even at the deepest, coldest point of the Ice Age, those islands sit on the far side of it. Which means whoever made those tools had to cross open water to get there. 1,000,000 years ago, long, long before our species even existed. The tool makers weren't us. They were an older, smaller-brained human ancestor. The same lineage that, marooned on Flores, shrank over time into a tiny human species, barely a meter tall, the one scientists nicknamed the Hobbit. A creature with a brain about a third the size of yours somehow got across a sea. Barrier that stops elephants and tigers and every big cat cold. Think about that for a second. The ocean wasn't first conquered by clever modern humans with big brains and big plans. It was crossed, somehow, by a little ancestor over 1,000,000 years before. Us, maybe on a tangled mat of vegetation torn loose by a tsunami. Maybe on purpose. We honestly don't know, and we may never know. But the sea has been letting humans through for 1,000,000 years. We were simply the ones who finally learned to do it on purpose. And then to do it again and again until we had touched nearly every shore on Earth. So come back to that beach. It's 50,000 years ago, and you're standing at the edge of the water again, raft at your feet, an invisible shore somewhere past the curve of the world. Everyone you love is either behind you or climbing onto the raft beside you. And you push off, not because you're certain, but because you've read the sky, and the swell, and the birds, and you've decided the far side is real. Every single person alive whose ancestors ever crossed an ocean is descended from someone who made exactly that choice. The sea never got smaller. We just got braver. And that is how ancient humans crossed entire oceans, one impossible, deliberate, terrifying paddle stroke at a time.